Welcome, weary traveler of the waking world. If you found yourself here, staring at the ceiling again at 2 a.m., eyes wide, mind racing, fear not. You're about to be taken on a journey so historically slow and bureaucratically dull, it just might knock you out cold. Tonight, we're diving into the Roman Empire. Not the bloody battles, not the betrayal of Julius Caesar, and definitely not the gladiators. No, we're going somewhere much slower. This is mind-numbing Roman Empire facts for insomnia. Now, get comfortable, close your eyes, and let's begin with taxes. Section 1. Roman Tax Code. Ah, taxes, the beating heart of Roman boredom. Did you know the Roman Empire had a tax on urine? Yes, that's right. Under Emperor Vespasian, public urinals were taxed, not just the building of them. No, the actual urine collection. The logic? Urine contained ammonia and was used in tanning leather and laundering clothes. So if someone was profiting off pee, Rome wanted a cut. Now picture it. A line of toga-clad Roman bureaucrats carefully measuring jars of collected urine, counting coins, writing receipts in Latin. It gets even better. Tax collectors in Rome were often private contractors. These publicani were hated by the people and often overcharged just to turn a profit. The tax code was thousands of lines long, filled with exemptions, confusing rates, and regional exceptions. Imagine being in Gaul and trying to explain to a Roman official that your goat should not be taxed because it was technically a domestic companion and not livestock. That argument actually happened. In court. Section 2. Roman concrete, the slow-setting miracle. Roman concrete was arguably one of their greatest inventions and also one of the most boring topics in a history textbook. Called opus caementitium, this mixture of volcanic ash, lime, and seawater would harden not in days, not in weeks, but over years. Years. Imagine watching your local aqueduct not be finished because the engineers were waiting for the concrete to finish curing over the course of your entire childhood. Even the Pantheon's dome, the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world, was a slow, gray masterpiece of waiting. And yet thrillingly, the Romans didn't know why it worked so well. They didn't understand the chemistry. They just knew that if they stirred in the right volcanic dust and ignored it for a decade or two, eventually they'd have something solid. Truly thrilling. Section 3. The slow rise of the bureaucracy. By the 3rd century, the Roman bureaucracy was so large and inefficient that entire towns existed just to support paper pushing. Clerks would spend decades working on the same records, copying birth certificates, tax rolls, or census forms onto scrolls using painstaking calligraphy. The ink dried slowly. The scrolls curled. Everything had to be stored in the right humidity, or the records might fade. Every 5 years, they conducted a census, not for fun, not for curiosity. Number for taxes. Imagine a man traveling on foot across hundreds of miles to count sheep, just to know how many denarii the empire could squeeze from a dusty village in Britannia. Every census record had to be filed, and then recopied, then translated, then stored, then forgotten, only to be rediscovered by modern historians who would use them to write doctoral theses that no one reads. Section 4. The excruciatingly long titles of Roman emperors. You may think a name like Emperor Augustus is nice and tidy, but by the late Empire, emperors began collecting titles like hoarders collect, expired yogurt. For example, the full title of Emperor Diocletian was Imperator Caesar, Gaius Aurelius, Valerius Diocletianus, Pius, Felix Invictus, Augustus Pontifex, Maximus Germanicus, Maximus Sarmaticus, Maximus Persicus, Maximus Tribunicia, Potestate, the 17th Imperator, the 24th Consul, the 8th. Pater Patriae Proconsul. Try saying that 5 times fast, or once. Awake. Each word meant something specific, like how many times he'd won a victory, how many times he'd served as consul, or how many people he claimed to be father of. Imagine being his assistant. Every document had to open with that. Every coin had to have a version of it. Every speech began with a solid 90 seconds of naming before the speech even began. By then, you were asleep or praying for sleep. Section 5. The Roman Postal Service. Yes, they had one. It was called the cursus publicus, and it was the most efficient, slow system of messengers the world had ever seen. Messages were passed from rider to rider, post house to post house, often changing hands dozens of times before reaching their destination. If you lived in Britain and wanted to send a message to Rome, it could take weeks, sometimes months, and then the reply might take just as long. And you thought waiting for a package in the mail was bad. A Roman senator might die before a message confirming his promotion arrived. Entire governors were replaced by the time they got word they'd been hired. Section 6. The Latin language. A sleep aid in itself. Latin, the language of the Romans. It is so structurally rigid that each noun has multiple endings depending on how it's used. Every verb is conjugated into more tenses than you even knew existed. There are 6 noun cases, 5 declensions, 4 conjugations, and countless rules that only half the empire followed correctly. If you want to say, the farmer gives the girl a rose, you must properly use the dative for girl, the accusative for rose, and know which form of to give to use, depending on if it's Tuesday or a holiday in Gaul. Learning Latin is like doing algebra with your tongue. Even Cicero, the great orator, once complained that Latin was not designed for efficiency, but for elegance. Translation: it was fancy and slow, just like Roman Senate debates, which sometimes went on for days. Literal days. Senators would take turns quoting poetry, debating commas, fighting over how many slaves should be allowed to carry incense into a courtroom. Section 7. The monotony of Roman measurements. Before you drift off completely, let's gently ease into the Roman system of measurements. The Romans used units like the piece, which is Latin for foot, and it measured about 11.65 inches, not quite the same as our modern foot. Then there was the uncia, 1/12 of a foot, which is where we get the word inch. But it didn't stop there. There was the palmus, which was 4 digits wide. The digitus, about 0.73 inches. Then you had the actuus, which was 120 Roman feet. And the jugerum, a land measurement, roughly equivalent to the area a team of oxen could plow in one day, but only under specific conditions, and not in winter. So farmers had to calculate land ownership with a system that involved oxen, plow speed, soil quality, and foot-length conversions. Some legal cases over farmland disputes lasted for decades. One dispute in southern Italy over the shape of a vineyard boundary lasted so long that both original landowners had died, and their grandchildren were left arguing about where a hedge had once stood. This is the kind of slow-burning drama that puts even the most enthusiastic historian gently to sleep. Section 8. Public baths and the art of doing nothing. Public baths were a pillar of Roman society, but not in a particularly exciting way. People didn't just bathe. They lingered. They soaked. They sat in lukewarm water while discussing taxes, grain prices, and scrolls they were meaning to read. The thermae were vast buildings, with multiple rooms dedicated to doing nothing. First, the apoditerium, where you undressed. Then the tepidarium, a warm room where you sat and did nothing. Then the caldarium, a hot room where you sweated and did nothing. Then the frigidarium, a cold plunge where you momentarily did something, then returned to doing nothing. Some people stayed at the baths for entire afternoons, reclining on stone benches, slowly discussing whether or not fish sauce should be taxed at the same rate as olive oil. Spoiler alert, it was, eventually. Section 9. Roman laws, all 4,000 of them. Roman law was impressive, thorough, and mind-numbingly dense. The 12 Tables, the earliest attempt at codifying Roman law, was just the beginning. By the height of the empire, there were over 4,000 individual laws and legal principles, some contradicting others. Many written in archaic Latin, even Romans struggled to understand. There were laws about how loud a person could shout in a residential area, about who had the right-of-way on a narrow bridge, about how many chickens you could own in a city block. One senator proposed a law regulating how close to the city walls you could store your compost pile. It passed. Legal proceedings could take months or years. Sometimes, a single case about a broken cartwheel could involve up to 5 lawyers, 3 judges, and hundreds of written depositions. And remember, there were no typewriters. Every word was copied by hand, slowly. Every law scroll was stored in archives guarded by scribes who were required to memorize not just locations, but the style and hand of the scribes before them. It was bureaucracy so heavy, it could crush dreams or induce deep, undisturbed sleep. Section 10. Roman dining. Multiple courses of mild disappointment. If you thought Roman feasts were exciting, think again. Yes, the elite occasionally dined on exotic fare, but for most Romans, meals were repetitive, tepid, and bland. The poor ate a gruel called pulse, made from barley, water, and perhaps, if you were lucky, a scrap of vegetable. It was eaten twice a day, every day, with a spoon. Sometimes, the wealthy had longer meals, but the experience was often drawn out, with course after course of boiled vegetables, lukewarm dormice, and sauces made from fermented fish guts. And they didn't eat sitting upright. They reclined for hours. Imagine lying on your side, trying to keep your toga clean, slowly eating a cold oyster, while someone reads a poem about the goddess Ceres and her favorite kinds of barley. At the end of the meal, a slave might bring you a small sponge dipped in rose water to dab your forehead. Nothing more. Just a moist sponge as dessert. Section 11. Temples, timekeeping, and tedium. Temples in ancient Rome weren't always places of excitement and ceremony. Many stood quietly, collecting dust, with priests performing rituals so repetitive that some of them learned the words without knowing what they meant. Timekeeping was done with sundials and water clocks, both of which were inconsistent, difficult to read, and largely inaccurate. The famous Roman author Pliny the Elder once wrote an entire commentary criticizing sundials, because no 2 sundials in the same square ever agreed on what time it was. And yet, people still tried to schedule meetings at the 3rd hour, or before the 9th bell. This led to people showing up late, very late, or not at all. Entire Senate sessions were canceled because no one could agree if it was still morning. Section 12. The Roman calendar. A mess of months and math. Before Julius Caesar reformed it, the Roman calendar was so inaccurate that it had drifted 3 months out of sync with the seasons. The solution? Caesar added 90 days to 1 year just to realign things. That year had 445 days. It was called the last year of confusion. Imagine it. A year that felt like it would never end. Winter lasting into summer, farmers planting crops by moonlight, unsure if the gods were punishing them or if the Senate just forgot what month it was. Even after Caesar's fix, leap years were often misapplied, priests miscounted, festivals fell in the wrong seasons. One emperor celebrated a spring ritual in mid-autumn, and the people? They just sighed and waited for someone to invent a wristwatch. Section 13. Roman gardens and the joy of watching plants grow. The Romans loved their gardens, but not for flowers, not for splendor. Roman gardens were often designed for quiet contemplation. Paths wound in perfect circles. Shrubs were trimmed into carefully measured squares. The most exciting feature might be a small fountain that trickled water so slowly it could be outpaced by a lazy snail. Philosophers would sit in these gardens for hours, watching fig trees, observing the subtle movement of vines across a trellis, debating whether bees were divine or simply very orderly insects. One senator reportedly spent an entire summer sketching the same olive tree, each leaf, each tiny change. His journal had no commentary, only lines, measurements, observations of nothing. It was not a thrilling garden. but it was deeply Roman and deeply sleep-inducing. Section 14. The Empire's Obsession with Storage Jars. Amphorae. That is the Roman name for tall ceramic jars used to store oil, wine, grain, and more oil. They were everywhere. Over 100 million amphorae were produced in the empire. There were amphorae for fish paste, for vinegar, for different types of oil depending on thickness and clarity. Some even had stamps to indicate the exact producer, the year, and the province of origin. Imagine shopping in a Roman market. Your merchant walks you through amphora after amphora. Would you like olive oil from Hispania or from Baetica? This one is thicker. This one is from a hillside grove. This one is aged slightly longer in clay. The choice is endless. And yet the taste? Nearly identical. Once emptied, amphorae were tossed away. One hill in Rome, Monte Testaccio, is made almost entirely of broken jars. A mountain of pots, broken and forgotten. It sits silently to this day, waiting, watching, not doing anything. Just like you, in bed, listening, and slowly slipping into sleep. Section 15. Aqueducts and the Eternal Drip. Roman aqueducts were marvels of engineering, but they were also very slow. Water moved at a gentle incline, just enough to keep it flowing. Not rushing, not even trickling quickly, just creeping, like time itself. Some aqueducts ran for over 50 miles, carrying water from mountains through valleys and cities to public fountains. They were maintained by a group called the Water Priests. Their job was to inspect, patch, and ensure the water continued its slow journey without interruption. They walked the aqueduct lines every morning, in silence, listening for leaks. When they found one, they did not panic. They took out their wax tablets, wrote a note, waited for a mason. Sometimes the leak would be fixed. Other times, the water simply continued leaking for months, years, forever. And the aqueduct continued to flow. Slowly, patiently, quietly. Section 16. Inscriptions that nobody read. The Romans loved inscriptions. They chiseled messages into stone everywhere. On buildings, on tombs, on altars, on statues. Most were not dramatic. They were not declarations of glory or conquest. Most read like this: To Gaius Septimius Justus, grain distributor, serve the state well. May his sons remember his quiet deeds. Or, this column was restored under Marcus Fabius Rufus, 5th year of service. No funds were misused. They did not want attention. They wanted record-keeping, posterity, accountability. But after a few years, rain would wash the words into blur. Moss would grow. Tourists would stop reading. And the stone would just sit, unread, unknown, much like this sentence, fading, softening, silencing. Section 17. The institution of waiting in line. You might think queues are a modern invention, but the Romans waited in lines too. At the baths, at the baker, at the forums, in temples. They queued with tokens, coins, stones with numbers carved in them. You would hand yours to a priest or clerk and then wait. Sometimes for an hour, sometimes the entire day. One Roman poet complained that he stood in line for bread so long that the sun moved from overhead to behind the western hills. There was no music, no distractions, just a crowd of people slowly shuffling forward, listening to the low murmurs of the marketplace and the occasional cough. The only entertainment was watching someone argue over a loaf's weight, which never changed. But the argument did, slowly, over time, until finally the loaf was accepted, and the next person stepped forward. Section 18. The endlessness of the Roman roads. All roads lead to Rome, that is the saying. But what they do not tell you is how long those roads were, and how long it took to walk them. The average Roman road stretched in a straight line over hills, valleys, and rivers. It did not curve gently. It did not weave. It marched forward like a stone snake across the landscape. Walking a Roman road was tiring, not just because of distance, but because of the monotony. One foot in front of the other, for days. Each milestone marked another 1,000 steps. Each step echoed like the last. And when you reached the next town, there was often only a tavern, a stable, and another milestone pointing toward another town that looked the same. Travelers recorded their journeys in logs, journals filled with phrases like, "dusty again today," or "the hills never seem to end." And still they walked. And still the road stretched. And still the stones waited, unmoved. Section 19. The Roman weather report that never changed. The Romans had no meteorologists, no satellite images, no Doppler radar. What they had were patterns, predictable, dry patterns. In Rome, most days were simply described as fair. A senator waking up might ask, "How is the weather today?" The reply? The same as yesterday. It might be cloudy, it might not, but unless lightning struck your villa or the Tiber flooded, the weather was considered unworthy of note. Writers filled scrolls with details of war and politics, but not weather, because there was nothing to say. Summer was hot. Autumn was warm. Winter was mild. Spring was damp. And then it began again. The sun rose, the sun set, and the citizens of Rome went about their days, unfazed. Just like you now, waiting for something to change, but nothing does. And that, too, is peaceful. Section 20. The majestic slowness of Roman paint drying. Roman frescoes were beautiful, but they were slow, painted onto wet plaster, pigment by pigment, with mineral powders and careful water mixtures. The artist would not rush, because if he did, the plaster would dry too soon, or the color would not hold. So he painted slowly, methodically, one patch at a time. A single square foot could take a full afternoon. Some walls took months to complete. In Pompeii, a dining room fresco was found half-finished. The artist had painted 2 birds and then stopped, possibly for lunch, and never came back. For centuries, those birds have sat, unblinking, alone, waiting for color to reach their wings. Waiting. And in the silence of those painted walls, time itself began to soften, and sleep crept in like a thin film of lime dust. Section 21. The economic stability of Roman buttons that didn't exist. The Roman tunic had no buttons. Clothing was held together with knots, and brooches, and pins. If a pin broke, you replaced it, slowly, carefully. The average Roman citizen owned 2 tunics, maybe 3. You put it on. You tied a belt. If it was windy, you held the edges down with your hands. There was no fashion season, no dramatic change in cut or fit. Togas were togas, cloaks were cloaks. And they did not change for centuries. Clothing was not self-expression. It was simply fabric, covering your body, as predictably as the sun covering the forum. No choices, no colors, no decisions to make. Just wrap and walk and forget. Section 22. The glacial pace of Roman tax collection. Taxes were serious business in Rome, but not fast business. Tax collectors, or publicani, would travel for weeks to reach remote towns. They brought scrolls, ledgers, ink, and sometimes a mule. They set up under shaded tents and waited. Citizens came one by one, offered coin, or grain, or livestock. Sometimes they didn't have enough, so they promised to return with more. And the publicanus would nod, write it down, close the ledger, and wait. Some payments came a year later. Some never came at all. But no one rushed. No one knocked at doors. The empire would wait, because empires are patient, just like your thoughts now, drifting fading, stretching toward the end of a long ledger line. Section 23. Roman musical performances that lingered. Music in Rome was not a burst of drums or a fanfare of trumpets. It was flutes, harps, soft choral arrangements sung in slow repetition. Performances in private villas might last for hours. One note followed another with wide pauses in between. There were no claps, no cheering, only polite nodding, and the occasional yawn hidden behind a goblet of watered wine. The most popular songs were hymns, not for excitement, but for stability. They were sung the same way every time, year after year, decade after decade. A Roman born in 20 BCE might hear the same temple hymn at age 60 that he had heard at age 6. Nothing changed. And that sameness, that calm, it blanketed the mind like a warm linen sheet. Section 24. The infinite stillness of the Senate during summer. During the hottest weeks of summer, the Roman Senate slowed. Fewer motions were introduced. Fewer debates were held. Some senators simply stayed home, napping in shaded courtyards. Those who attended sessions fanned themselves with scrolls or dozed lightly behind marble columns. It was not considered rude. It was understood. The marble walls stayed cool, but the air hung thick, heavy, still. Even the scribes took longer to dip their quills. If a vote occurred, it was often unanimous, not because everyone agreed, but because no one had the energy to object. Decisions were recorded with a tired hand, and then all went silent again. Only the echo of sandals in the hallway remained. Slow, rhythmic, almost like a lullaby. Section 25. The Roman aqueducts carried billions of gallons of water. Rome's aqueducts were marvels of engineering. They carried over 300 million gallons of water every day. Water traveled through channels, some over 50 miles long. Made from stone and concrete, the aqueducts used gravity alone. Not a single pump moved the water. It flowed gently, sometimes underground, sometimes across massive stone arches. This steady supply supported baths, fountains, private homes, and public toilets. Without this water, Rome could not have grown so large. It was a slow, constant flow of life running beneath the city's streets. Section 26. The Roman road system stretched over 250 miles. Romans built more than 250 miles of roads across their empire. That's enough to circle the earth 10 times. These roads were layered carefully with stones, sand, and gravel. They drained rainwater to keep the surface dry and durable. The most famous, the Via Appia, connected Rome to the southern regions. Travelers could walk or ride for days without losing their way. Milestones marked every Roman mile, roughly 800 feet. The roads were so well made, some still exist today. A slow network of stone veins that kept an empire alive. Section 27. The Roman legions were structured like a machine. Roman soldiers fought not as individuals, but as parts of a huge machine. Each legion had about 50 men divided into centuries of 80 soldiers. Centuries formed cohorts. 10 cohorts made one legion. Every soldier trained relentlessly. They marched up to 20 miles a day, carrying armor and weapons weighing 60 pounds. Legions built their own camps every night, often from scratch. Their discipline and formations gave Rome an unmatched advantage. A slow, grinding power that conquered continents. Section 28. Romans used urine for cleaning and tooth whitening. Romans recycled everything, including urine. Urine contains ammonia, a natural cleaning agent. Fullers used it to bleach togas and clean clothes in large vats. Some wealthy Romans even used urine as a mouthwash to whiten teeth. It might sound strange now, but for them, it was common practice. Collected in pots placed on street corners, the urine fueled daily hygiene. A slow, practical use of resources that surprised many later historians. Section 29. The Roman calendar had 355 days and was constantly changing. Before Julius Caesar's reform, the Roman calendar had only 355 days. It was lunar-based, which caused months to drift out of sync with the seasons. To fix this, priests added an extra month every few years, but often forgot. This led to confusion about dates for festivals and elections. In 45 BCE, Caesar introduced the Julian calendar. It had 365 days plus a leap day every 4 years. This calendar was so accurate that it lasted over 600 years. A slow march towards a more reliable way to measure time. Section 30. Roman public baths could accommodate thousands daily. Public baths were social centers, as well as places to clean. Some, like the baths of Caracalla, covered 33 acres and held up to 600 bathers at once. People visited baths daily to bathe, exercise, and socialize. Baths featured hot, warm, and cold pools, steam rooms, and massage areas. They had complex heating systems called hypocausts, where hot air flowed beneath the floors. Romans often spent hours relaxing in these spaces. A slow ritual blending hygiene, health, and community. Section 31. Roman cities had complex sewage systems. Rome's Cloaca Maxima was one of the world's earliest sewage systems. Built originally in the 6th century BCE, it drained local marshes and stormwater. Later expanded to carry household waste from the city's toilets. The sewer ran beneath the Forum and emptied into the Tiber River. This system helped control floods and kept the city cleaner than most others at the time. A slow underground current removing the city's waste silently, day and night. Section 32. Romans consumed garum, a fermented fish sauce, daily. Garum was the ketchup of ancient Rome. Made from fermented fish guts, it was a staple flavoring in Roman cuisine. Every meal might include a dash or two to enhance taste. It was produced in large vats along the Mediterranean coast. Some recipes were guarded as family secrets. Romans prized high-quality garum and traded it across the empire. A slow, pungent flavor, weaving its way through Roman kitchens and markets. Section 33. The Roman Senate was often a quiet place filled with powerful silences. Though famous for debates, the Senate was also a place of long pauses and careful calculation. Senators often spoke sparingly, choosing their words with caution. Decisions could be made by silence or unanimous nods. Sessions sometimes dragged on for hours, filled with ritual and protocol. The power of the Senate was not always loud. Sometimes it was the weight of presence and patience, a slow and steady undercurrent beneath Rome's political storms. Section 34. Romans used lead pipes to supply water, slowly poisoning themselves. Romans pioneered plumbing with lead pipes called fistulae. These pipes delivered water directly into homes and baths. But lead is toxic. Over time, some Romans likely suffered from lead poisoning. Historians debate the impact, but lead buildup could cause headaches and memory loss. Despite this, the convenience outweighed the dangers for many. A slow, unseen cost beneath the city's gleaming surface. Section 35. Roman theaters were built with advanced acoustics. Roman theaters could hold thousands and were designed to carry sound perfectly. Actors didn't use microphones. Instead, architecture shaped sound to reach every ear. Semicircular seating and stone walls reflected voices naturally. Theaters were open air but could amplify soft whispers. Audience members could hear dialogue from the stage without effort. A slow blending of art and science echoing through marble rows. Section 36. Roman soldiers carried a pack called the sarcina. Each legionary carried a sarcina-heavy pack weighing up to 60 pounds. It held tools, food, spare weapons, and shelter materials. Soldiers built camps every night with these items. They carried everything they needed for survival on long marches. This self-sufficiency was key to Roman military success. A slow grind of preparation, turning men into unstoppable forces. Section 37. Romans used whales in ceremonial festivals. During some imperial games, whales or large sea creatures were showcased. Captured from the Mediterranean, these animals symbolized power and conquest. They were displayed in large tanks or floated on barges during festivals. Such spectacles amazed crowds and showed Rome's dominion over nature. A slow, awe-inspiring reminder of the empire's reach. Section 38. Romans kept calendars in both solar and lunar forms. Romans combined lunar months with solar years before the Julian reform. This caused ongoing adjustments to keep festivals in season. Priests sometimes manipulated the calendar for political reasons. The system was complicated and often confusing. It wasn't until Julius Caesar's calendar that things slowed to a steady pace. A slow evolution from chaos to order in time itself. Section 39. Romans used graffiti to communicate across the city. Walls across Rome were covered with graffiti. Some were political messages. Others were love notes or advertisements. Many inscriptions survive today, carved or painted onto stone. They reveal everyday thoughts and humor. This slow, informal communication connected people in a way official documents could not. A city speaking quietly through its walls. Section 40. Roman statues often had bronze details that have since vanished. Many marble statues once featured bronze eyes, teeth, or jewelry. These details gave sculptures lifelike expressions. Over centuries, the softer bronze was looted or melted down. What remains now are smooth white figures missing their vibrant accents. A slow fading of color and life from stone faces, leaving behind the quiet echo of what once was. Section 41. Roman gladiator fights were often carefully controlled events. Gladiator fights seem wild, but many were carefully managed. Referees called summa rutus oversaw matches. Combatants trained for years, mastering specific fighting styles. Not every fight ended in death. Victories were often awarded by skill and endurance. The crowd's roar influenced decisions, but survival was possible. A slow, brutal dance-balancing spectacle and strategy. Section 42. Romans built underground cemeteries called catacombs. Beneath Rome's streets lie vast catacombs. Labyrinths carved into soft rock served as burial places. Christians and Jews used these tunnels during times of persecution. Walls were decorated with frescoes and inscriptions. Families visited quietly, lighting small oil lamps. The catacombs offered a slow passage between the living and the dead. A hidden world where memory lingered in soft shadows. Section 43. The Roman legions used standardized weapons and armor. Roman soldiers carried the gladius, a short sword designed for stabbing. They also wore segmented armor called lorica segmentata. This armor was made of iron strips fastened to leather. It was lighter and more flexible than earlier designs. Standardization made training and repairs easier. The slow refinement of gear gave Rome's armies consistency. Uniformity was a quiet strength beneath every legion's banner. Section 44. Roman women wore hairstyles that took hours to create. Roman women's hairstyles could be elaborate and time-consuming. Some styles involved intricate braids, curls, and curls piled high. Special slaves called ornatrices styled hair with combs and pins. Pomade and oils kept hair shiny and in place. These styles reflected status and fashion trends from the imperial court. Hours could be spent in silence, sitting still. A slow art of beauty and social signaling. Section 45. The Roman Forum was the city's political and social center. At the heart of Rome was the Forum, a large plaza surrounded by temples and government buildings. It was where citizens gathered for markets, speeches, and trials. The Forum was a slow-moving stage for politics and religion. Monuments and statues stood silent witnesses. Every stone held stories of power, debate, and everyday life. The pulse of Rome's civic spirit beat quietly here, steady and unrelenting. Section 46. Roman gladiators often became celebrities with fans and followers. Successful gladiators gained fame and sometimes fortune. They had fans who followed their careers and cheered their victories. Some gladiators received gifts and endorsements from wealthy patrons. They appeared in public parades and banquets. Though slaves or prisoners often fought, fame gave some a slow path to freedom. A strange mix of violence and celebrity in the city's heart. Section 47. Romans practiced dentistry with tools resembling modern instruments. Romans developed dental tools, like forceps and drills made from bronze. They could perform simple tooth extractions and cleanings. Medical texts describe remedies for toothaches. Some treatments included rinses with herbal infusions or honey. Dentistry was slow and primitive by modern standards, but surprisingly advanced for the time. The mouth was carefully tended, even in a busy empire. Section 48. Roman concrete was stronger than modern concrete in some ways. Roman builders used a mix of volcanic ash, lime, and seawater to create concrete. This formula made structures like the Pantheon durable for millennia. Modern scientists still study this concrete to understand its longevity. It slowly hardened underwater, gaining strength with time. This ancient material is a silent testimony to Roman innovation, a slow hardening of ideas into lasting monuments. Section 49. The Roman diet was rich in grains, fruits, and vegetables. Roman meals typically included cereals like wheat and barley. Fruits, such as figs, grapes, and apples were common. Vegetables like lentils, cabbage, and onions filled plates. Meat was expensive and eaten less frequently. Fish and seafood were also popular near coastal cities. Meals were slow occasions for nourishment and conversation. A balanced diet in a vast and varied empire. Section 50. Romans used public toilets with long benches and running water. Public latrines had stone benches with holes spaced evenly apart. Water constantly flowed beneath to carry waste away. People used sponges on sticks as toilet paper. These sponges were rinsed in water channels after use. Toilets were places of socializing and gossip as much as hygiene. The slow flow of water beneath kept the city cleaner than most others. A quiet system of sanitation under bustling feet. Section 50. 1. Roman military camps were like small, organized towns. Every night on a campaign, Roman legions built fortified camps called castra. These camps were arranged in precise, rectangular grids. They had streets, barracks, storage buildings, and headquarters. The design allowed for quick assembly and disassembly. Even under moonlight, soldiers worked calmly and efficiently. These camps were like small towns that rose and fell with the legions. A slow, steady rhythm of building and breaking, moving ever forward. Section 52. Romans had a system of fire brigades called vigiles. Rome was vulnerable to fires, so the vigiles acted as firefighters and night watchmen. They patrolled streets with buckets and pumps, ready to douse flames. The vigiles also enforced curfews and guarded against crime. Their presence was a quiet safeguard in the vast urban sprawl. Though fires still broke out, this organized force slowed destruction, a steady hand keeping the city's chaos at bay through the long nights. Section 53. Romans used tortoise formation for protection. In battle, soldiers could form a testudo, or tortoise formation. They held shields overhead and on all sides to create a protective shell. This slow-moving shield wall was nearly impervious to arrows and projectiles. It allowed legions to advance under heavy fire. The testudo was a methodical defense, a moving fortress of metal and discipline, an ancient example of collective protection, step by slow step. Section 54. Romans enjoyed board games like latrunculi. Latrunculi was a popular Roman board game resembling chess or checkers. Players moved pieces strategically across a grid, capturing opponents. It was a game of patience, planning, and slow maneuvering. Often played during leisure or in taverns, games could last for hours with quiet concentration. A subtle pastime reflecting Roman appreciation for tactics beyond the battlefield. Section 55. The Colosseum could hold up to 50 spectators. The massive amphitheater seated tens of thousands who came to watch gladiators and beast hunts. It had a complex system of entrances and exits, allowing crowds to move slowly but efficiently. Shade was provided by an awning called the velarium, stretched by sailors. Events lasted for hours, filled with ritual and spectacle. The Colosseum was a slow stage for Rome's grandest dramas. Stone and crowd moving in a timeless rhythm. Section 56. Romans wrote letters on wax tablets. Before paper, Romans used wooden tablets coated in wax for writing. They inscribed messages with a stylus and could erase by smoothing the wax. Wax tablets were reusable and portable. People carried them for daily notes or official documents. The slow scratching of styluses on wax was the Roman version of texting. Messages traveling softly across the city and empire. Section 57. The Roman Pax Romana lasted about 200 years. The Pax Romana, or Roman peace, was a period of relative stability from 27 BCE to 180 CE. During this time, Rome experienced minimal large-scale warfare internally. Trade flourished, arts advanced, and cities grew. Governance was steady, but also slow to adapt at times. This long peace was not perfect, but allowed the empire to flourish quietly. A calm pause amid centuries of conquest and change. Section 58. Roman slaves made up about 1/3 of the population. Slavery was widespread in Rome. Slaves worked in households, farms, mines, and public projects. Many were prisoners of war or born into slavery. Despite their status, some slaves gained education and trust. Freed slaves could become citizens and sometimes wealthy. This slow social undercurrent supported the empire's economy, a hidden, silent workforce, powering Rome's daily life. Section 59. Roman cities had central heating in some houses. Wealthy Romans used hypocaust systems to heat floors and walls. Hot air from furnaces flowed beneath raised floors. This provided gentle, even warmth during winter. Such technology was slow to spread but symbolized luxury. Comfort moving unseen beneath stone and tile. A quiet warmth in grand villas and baths. Section 60. The Roman Empire was divided into provinces governed by officials. To manage its vast territory, Rome divided lands into provinces. Each province had a governor appointed by Rome. Governors enforced laws, collected taxes, and maintained peace. Communication was slow, relying on couriers and ships. This system kept distant corners connected, if often loosely. A slow network of power stretching from the city center to the empire's edges. Section 61. Roman aqueducts used gravity to carry water long distances. The Romans built aqueducts to supply cities with fresh water. These stone channels sloped gently, relying on gravity alone. Water traveled for miles through tunnels and bridges. The flow was slow but steady, ensuring a continuous supply. Aqueducts fed fountains, baths, and homes with clean water. Their quiet, constant flow was a lifeline beneath the city's surface. A slow river carved from stone and engineering skill. Section 62. Roman baths were centers for socializing and relaxation. Public baths offered more than just washing. People gathered to talk, exercise, and relax. Bathhouses had multiple rooms with different temperatures. The process was deliberate. Warm rooms led to hot, then cold. Visitors moved slowly through these spaces, cleansing body and mind. Baths were a place to slow down amidst the bustle of the city. steam and water weaving through everyday life. Section 63. The Roman legionaries' daily routine was strict and repetitive. A soldier's day began before dawn with drills and weapon maintenance. They marched, trained, and built camps with precise discipline. Meals were simple, taken quickly. Evenings involved tending armor and preparing for the next day. This steady routine built strength and cohesion. The slow grind of discipline shaped the empire's might. A rhythm as steady as the beating of a soldier's heart. Section 64. Romans used olive oil for cooking and skincare. Olive oil was essential in Roman kitchens and baths. It was used for frying food and as a base for sauces. Romans also applied it to their skin after bathing. The oil moisturized and protected against sun and wind. Harvesting olives was a slow, seasonal ritual. The golden oil flowed through cuisine and care alike, a liquid thread woven through daily life. Section 65. Roman writers often copied texts by hand. Books were handwritten scrolls or codices. Copying was a slow, painstaking process done by scribes. Mistakes were common and had to be carefully corrected. This laborious work preserved poetry, history, and law. Texts traveled slowly from city to city, copying over centuries. The written word was fragile and precious, a slow chain linking minds across generations. Section 66. Roman women wore tunic-like garments called stoles. The stola was a long dress worn by Roman women. It was typically made of wool or linen and draped loosely. The garment symbolized modesty and social status. Women moved gracefully, the fabric flowing slowly with each step. Colors and embroidery reflected rank and fashion. Clothing was a quiet statement in the empire's visual language, a slow dance of fabric and identity. Section 67. Roman roads were built to last for centuries. Roman engineers layered roads with stones, gravel, and paving slabs. Drainage systems prevented flooding. These roads stretched thousands of miles. Travel was slow but reliable, allowing armies and traders to move efficiently. Many Roman roads remain in use today, a testament to careful planning. The empire's veins carried commerce and communication, a steady path carved through time and terrain. Section 68. Roman festivals were rituals to honor gods and ensure good harvests. Festivals like Saturnalia brought communities together. They included feasts, gift-giving, and public games. Some rituals involved processions and sacrifices. The celebrations slowed daily life, marking cycles of nature and belief. Even the busiest city paused for these sacred moments, a rhythm rooted in faith and seasonal change. The slow turning of the year reflected in human ceremony. Section 69. Roman law was codified in the 12 Tables. The 12 Tables were Rome's first written laws. They covered property, crime, family, and civil rights. Having laws written down was a slow shift toward fairness and transparency. These laws influenced many future legal systems. They reflected Roman values and social order, a foundation laid slowly but firmly in stone and ink. Justice was a measured process, not sudden judgment. Section 70. Roman cities often had large central markets called fora. Markets were bustling places but operated with quiet order. Stalls sold food, textiles, pottery, and tools. Prices were often set by local magistrates to prevent gouging. Buyers and sellers negotiated patiently. The market was a slow exchange of goods and stories. It was the economic heartbeat of urban life, a place where the empire's diversity met in steady commerce. Section 71. Roman houses often included a small shrine to household gods. Known as the Lararium, these shrines honored protective spirits called lares. Families offered food and incense here daily. The Lararium was a quiet focal point in the home. Prayers were whispered with reverence and routine. These rituals tied the family to tradition and the divine, a slow, sacred thread running through domestic life. Guardians watched silently from painted niches. Section 72. Romans used grapes for wine and dried them into raisins. Grapevines covered hillsides around Rome. Wine was central to social and religious life. Romans drank diluted wine at meals to stay refreshed. Raisins were eaten as snacks or used in cooking. Harvesting was a slow, careful process timed with the seasons. The fruit connected earth and table in a gentle cycle. Wine flowed as a steady companion to history. Section 73. Roman schools taught reading, writing, and rhetoric. Education was valued, especially for boys from wealthy families. Lessons involved memorizing texts and practicing speeches. Teachers used wooden tablets and styluses. Students recited slowly to build mastery. Rhetoric was essential for public life and politics. Learning was a slow climb of discipline and repetition. The foundation for Rome's leaders was built word by word. Section 74. Roman theaters had orchestras and scenes that slowed dramatic tension. Plays were performed in large open-air theaters. Actors wore masks and exaggerated gestures. Music and chorus slowed the unfolding of stories. Audiences sat patiently through hours of tragedy or comedy. The theater was a place to reflect on society's values and conflicts. Drama unfolded slowly like a measured breath, a ritual of storytelling that stretched time itself. Section 75. Roman emperors often built grand monuments to legitimize their rule. Structures like triumphal arches and massive forums celebrated victories. Emperors commissioned statues depicting themselves as gods or heroes. Building was slow and expensive, but a lasting statement. These monuments shaped the cityscape and collective memory. They were reminders of power carved in stone and bronze. A slow, deliberate construction of legacy and legend. Section 76. Romans used calendar reforms to align time with agriculture. The Roman calendar was originally based on lunar cycles. Over time, inconsistencies caused confusion in farming and festivals. Julius Caesar introduced the Julian calendar, adjusting months and days. This reform slowly aligned civil time with the solar year. Farmers could predict planting seasons more reliably. The calendar was a quiet tool shaping daily life and rituals, a measured progression through the cycles of nature and empire. Section 77. Roman cities had public fountains as sources of drinking water. Fountains dotted city streets, fed by aqueducts. Citizens gathered to fill containers and socialize. The water flowed gently, a constant presence in urban life. These fountains marked communal spaces and civic pride. People moved slowly in line, exchanging greetings and news. The rhythm of water and conversation blended seamlessly. Life in the empire's heart pulsed quietly around these fountains. Section 78. Roman legionaries carried a toolkit for building camps and defenses. Besides weapons, soldiers bore tools like shovels and picks. Each day, after marching, they constructed walls and trenches. Building was methodical, a key to survival and strategy. This routine of digging and reinforcing took hours. Through sweat and dust, the camp took shape each night. The slow labor behind every night's safety was the legion's backbone. A fortress forged step by step, earth by earth. Section 79. Roman education included study of Greek language and culture. Greek culture deeply influenced Rome. Young Romans studied Greek literature, philosophy, and rhetoric. Learning Greek was slow and demanding, but prestigious. Many tutors were Greek slaves or freedmen. This education linked Rome to the intellectual traditions of the Mediterranean. A careful passage of ideas across language and time. Roman identity was partly built on this quiet admiration. Section 80. Roman hospitals were primarily for soldiers. The military had valetudinaria, early hospitals for treating wounds and illness. These facilities had wards and basic surgical tools. Care was slow and often rudimentary, but better organized than civilian aid. Doctors used herbal remedies and performed amputations. Healing was a gradual process, requiring patience. These hospitals reflected Rome's investment in its fighting forces, a measured effort to restore strength and order. Section 81. Roman bread was often coarse and made from whole grains. Unlike modern white bread, Roman bread included bran and sometimes barley. It was dense, chewy, and filling. Bakers used large ovens called furnaces. Bread was a staple for soldiers and citizens alike. Daily baking was slow, done in communal or private ovens. Bread provided steady energy for work and battle, a humble but essential fuel in the empire's daily grind. Section 82. Roman gladiator school training was rigorous and long-term. Gladiators spent months training before entering the arena. They learned different fighting styles and weapons. Training was strict, emphasizing endurance and technique. Coaches pushed them slowly but relentlessly. Injury and recovery were common parts of their routine. The path to the arena was a long, grueling process of preparation. Victory was earned through discipline as much as brute strength. Section 83. Roman cities had complex sewage systems called cloaca maxima. Rome's cloaca maxima was one of the earliest sewage systems. It drained wastewater into the Tiber River. This system reduced flooding and improved sanitation. Maintenance was slow and ongoing but vital. The sewer tunnels ran beneath the city like silent arteries, a hidden infrastructure supporting life above. Rome's cleanliness was quietly engineered. Section 84. Roman poets like Virgil and Ovid shaped literature for centuries. Poets worked slowly, crafting verses in meter and style. Their works combined mythology, history, and personal reflection. Virgil's Aeneid became Rome's national epic. Ovid's Metamorphoses explored transformation and myth. Their writings influenced education and culture deeply. Poetry was a slow art of shaping identity and memory. Words carved in time, echoing through ages. Section 85. Roman fish sauce, garum, was a staple condiment. Garum was made by fermenting fish parts with salt. It had a strong smell but was used in nearly every savory dish. Production was slow and smelly, often located outside city centers. Garum was traded widely and varied in quality. Romans valued it as much as we value ketchup or soy sauce today. A slow melding of flavors that defined Roman taste. A pungent thread running through meals and markets. Section 86. Romans relied on slaves to maintain luxury villas. Large villas outside the city were staffed by many slaves. They tended gardens, cooked meals, cleaned rooms, and entertained guests. The pace of daily work was steady and constant. Slaves moved quietly behind the scenes, ensuring comfort and order. Owners enjoyed leisure, while servants kept life running smoothly. This slow, invisible labor supported the grand lifestyle of Rome's elite, a silent hum beneath marble and mosaic. Section 87. Roman emperors used coins to spread political messages. Coins bore the emperor's image and inscriptions. They circulated slowly through the economy, carrying propaganda. Emperors commemorated victories, divine favor, or family lineage. People held these coins daily, connecting with imperial authority. Money was not just currency, but a tool for shaping loyalty. A slow, steady whisper of power in pockets and markets. The emperor's face passed from hand to hand like a quiet reminder. Section 88. Romans practiced augury to interpret the will of the gods. Augurs observed birds' flight patterns and behavior. These slow, careful readings guided decisions on war and politics. A bird's call or sudden silence could change the course of an army. Interpretations were deliberate and weighted with tradition. Religion and governance intertwined in a measured dance. Signs from nature were read like ancient scripts, a quiet dialogue between earth, sky, and human fate. Section 89. Roman women's hairstyles evolved slowly with trends. Hairstyles were symbols of status and fashion. Elaborate braids and curls required hours of preparation. Women employed slaves or specialists called ornatrices to style their hair. Changing styles reflected shifting ideals of beauty and power. The slow crafting of appearance was a form of expression and influence. Each twist and coil told a story of identity and culture. A gradual transformation sculpted strand by strand. Section 90. Roman legions used standardized signals for slow but effective communication. In battle and camp, legions communicated using horns, flags, and gestures. These signals relayed orders over distances where shouting failed. Messages traveled step by step through ranks and sentries. This slow system maintained order amid chaos. Understanding and discipline ensured commands were followed precisely. Communication was a carefully choreographed flow, an unseen thread linking many thousands of men. Section 91. Roman streets were often noisy, yet life moved at a slower pace than today. Markets, carts, and pedestrians filled Rome's narrow streets. Despite the noise, people moved with care and patience. Traffic jams and accidents were common, but also accepted. Vendors called out, children played, and animals wandered. The city was alive, but its rhythm was more deliberate. Time stretched in the long shadows of stone buildings. Life pulsed with a slower, ancient heartbeat. Section 92. Romans used honey as a sweetener in food and medicine. Sugar was unknown, so honey was precious and widely used. It sweetened bread, wine, and desserts. Honey also treated wounds and coughs. Harvesting honey was a slow process involving careful tending of hives. The golden syrup flowed slowly but surely into kitchens and infirmaries. Honey connected nature's sweetness with human care. A quiet taste of the natural world in daily life. Section 93. Roman chariot races were spectacular events drawing huge crowds. Held in the Circus Maximus, races thrilled thousands. Charioteers drove at breakneck speeds around the track. The slow buildup of excitement gave way to bursts of intense action. Fans cheered, bet on teams, and experienced a roller coaster of emotions. The races were both sport and political spectacle. They brought the city together in a shared pulse of anticipation and release. A measured tension broken by sudden, fiery motion. Section 94. Roman dances were often performed during religious ceremonies. Dance accompanied rituals to honor gods and celebrate festivals. Movements were deliberate, symbolic, and sometimes slow. Dancers wore costumes and masks to represent divine figures. The rhythm connected participants with the sacred. These slow performances created space for reflection and reverence. Dance was a bridge between mortal and divine realms, a quiet expression of faith through bodily motion. Section 95. Roman pottery was both functional and decorative. Pottery vessels held wine, oil, grains, and water. Craftsmen shaped clay on slow-turning wheels. Decoration involved intricate painting and engraving. Pieces varied from simple jugs to elaborate amphorae. Pottery was everyday art, present in homes and markets. Each vessel carried stories of creation and use, a slow fusion of utility and beauty. Section 96. Roman emperors often held games to show their generosity. Games included gladiatorial combat, chariot races, and theatrical performances. These public spectacles could last days or weeks. They served as political tools to win favor and demonstrate power. Planning and execution took months of preparation. The events unfolded slowly but captivated audiences completely. Games reinforced social order and imperial presence, an elaborate rhythm of power and celebration. Section 97. Romans used slave labor to mine precious metals. Mines for gold, silver, and lead were dangerous and grueling places. Slaves worked long hours underground in darkness and dust. The work was slow and backbreaking. Despite the harsh conditions, these resources fueled Rome's wealth. The glitter of empire came at a steady human cost. A silent story beneath the shining surface of power. Section 98. Roman lawmakers held sessions in the Forum, often debating for hours. The Forum was the heart of political life. Senators and magistrates gathered to discuss laws and policies. Debates could be lengthy, with careful argumentation. Decisions were not rushed, but considered. This slow process shaped governance and justice. The voices echoed off marble and stone, steeped in tradition. A deliberate dance of words and wills. Section 99. Roman cities had barriers and gates that closed at night. To protect inhabitants, city gates shut after dusk. Guards patrolled the walls and streets. The closing was a slow signal that day was over. Inside, life quieted and citizens settled in. The walls were both protection and boundary. A measured transition from public bustle to private calm. The city breathed in slow cycles of light and dark. Section 100. Romans honored their ancestors with slow ceremonial rites. Funerals and commemorations were solemn and drawn out. Families gathered to remember and honor the dead. Offerings were made at tombs and household shrines. Stories of ancestors were recited carefully. These rituals linked past and present in a chain of memory. A slow, enduring respect for those who came before. The foundation of Roman identity rested on remembrance.